I'm your host, Hantos, and we'll start in a couple of minutes. But as usual, while we're waiting for everyone to join, we wanted to mention a couple of things first. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel at a later time, of course. For anyone joining us from over there already watching the video, thanks for watching and hope you have a great time. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Our next bug is going to be on the 6th of August at the same time as this one. And today, we'll have two iOS-related talks, followed by a panel discussion about WWDC 2020. Quick disclaimer, this is all community content, so these talks are not owned or produced by Bitrise. All of the ideas solely belong to the presenters. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them during or after the presentations or the panel discussion. We have the questions mode enabled, so if you have a question, you can find a little icon on top of your chat box that you can use to mark your question as a question. All right, cool. So without further ado, our first talk today is titled XCUITest, TestRail, and Bitrise, putting it all together. And it is by Moataz Nabil. Quick introduction. Moataz currently works as a senior SDT at Delivery Hero SC in Berlin, Germany. He's a test automation expert working on various projects with mobile automation. He has experience building an automation process from scratch for big distributed projects. Due to his passion for automation testing, he got full exposed to tools like Selenium, WeDriver, Cypress, Appium, Espresso, Rest Assured, and Postman. Moataz, are you there?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, cool. So, stage is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Agus, for your invitation. And I'm really happy to be with you in the second bug meetup. The second for me, and this is for sure the fourth one. So I will directly start by sharing my screen to be able to present. So just let me know if everything is displayed. So maybe I can check it. So can you see my screen now? Yes, okay. So our topic today, we will be talking about XCUITest, TestRail, and Bitrise, putting it all together. So mainly the topic is talking about the integration between XCUITest for iOS test automation and TestRail for test case management tools, and Bitrise for running both of them together in our CI server. My name is Moataz Nabil, and currently I'm working at Delivery Hero in Berlin, in Germany, as a senior software engineer in test. So a little bit information about me. So I have more than 12 years of development and test automation experience, and I worked before in business domains like agriculture, telecom, healthcare, fashion, and food delivery. I participated and designed test automation frameworks for web mobile API using different set of tools and programming languages, and also I implemented different CI/CD pipelines using different tools like GitLab, Bitbucket, Bitrise, GitHub Actions, and Jenkins. And here you can find my Twitter account, my GitHub account, and my technical blog if anyone interested to join me. So our agenda today is a small little bit. We will be talking about the idea, or what the idea behind our talk today, the strategy, how we can implement this idea, and the demo. So I hope that we have time to be able to check the demo today. So I put this one here because I usually believe in this quote or this sentence: you can't manage what you can't measure. And actually, this is related to our topic today. So if I can't measure anything, so I can't manage it. So our problem today, if we are talking about that, we need to measure, for example, the effort that we did with the test automation, how we can measure the test automation coverage, how we can to measure the return of investment from the test automation. If we can't measure this, so we can't manage, or we can't decide, shall we go with invest more effort in test automation or not? Shall we add more resources in our test automation or not? So we need to manage, or we need to measure to be able to manage our problems. So the idea is, we will start, or we will assume that from 1 year ago, maybe, and for example, we have a lot of manual test cases, or we start with TestRail by adding more test cases, because TestRail is a test case management tool. So we usually use it to create manual test cases, and we have a lot of manual test suites and test cases with TestRail. This is the fact, or this is the starter point in our idea. Then after that, we start thinking about that we need to start working with a test automation for iOS applications using XCUITest, which is the native tool from Apple. And after that, we also decide that we will running our UI test on Bitrise, even if it's on every pull request or if nightly build, it doesn't matter in this case, but we just align that we will use 3 of them. So we have manual test cases on TestRail. We are using XCUITest for iOS automation or test automation, and we are running them on Bitrise. But we have a gap between the manual and the TA script or test automation scripts. So we did a lot of efforts in test automation, but we still have gap. Did we cover a lot of test cases from the manual test suites or not? Shall we invest more in our test automation? What is the test automation coverage? How we can measure the success, or how we can measure the effort that we did with the XCUITest or test automation, and when we are mapping with the manual test, so we can decide, shall we go more with the test automation or not? And also we need to find a way to calculate the return of investment, or ROI, and show our TA effort. Because, for example, if you are talking about or if we are sending it to the product manager or the project manager about that we are investing more in the test automation, but at the end he can't find any result, or he usually go to the TestRail to check the percentage of coverage or the suites that we are running, but at the end he can't find any result. So we need to find a way to calculate the return of investment from our test automation. Then we need to find a solution for the TA coverage. So this is the idea, or this is our problem that we can talking about the implementation after that. So we mainly said that we have Bitrise and XCUITest and TesRail, and this is a little bit of information about 3 of them. If anyone doesn't know anything about all of them, so we just add a small introduction or small information about it. So Bitrise is a continuous integration and a continuous delivery platform as a service, or PaaS. So as focus more on mobile application development for iOS, Android, even if native, or React Native and Flutter if it's cross-platform, and also for Xamarin. And the second tool is XCUITest. So XCUITest is a test automation framework that's shipped by Apple, and it's let the iOS developers to create and run unit performance and UI test for Xcode project. And the third tool is TestRail. So TestRail, from the images, this is the tool, or this is one of the famous web-based test case management software to manage, track, organize test cases, increase the team productivity through actionable reports and metrics in real-time inside. So, for example, we are adding in this section, we are adding the test cases. So we have here 5 test cases under different categories or subcategories, and here this is the final result from our run. For example, it's displaying the percentage of passing or failing test cases with the reasons, and so we can manage everything. So this is what we are talking about. We need to put it all together to displaying actual result. So our strategy is to try to solve our problem or idea. So we will start from the TestRail side, because TestRail, or as a test case management tool, we need to enable connecting from or through APIs or TestRail APIs with our account. So we need to change the setting that we have on TestRail project to be able to connect with the API. Then second step, we need to find a client, or we need to implement or integrate TestRail API client into our project to be able to adding the test case IDs in our project in XCUITest, and then sending it through the API to TestRail. And after we integrated the API client, we start mapping our TestRail test cases ID with the test automation script. For example, this test script is mapped to this test case on TestRail, and this one is mapped to 3 or 4 manual test cases. For example, we have one script is collecting different test cases, so we can also map multiple test cases from TestRail. and adding a TestRail credentials as an environment variable, because if we are talking about best practices and we don't need to add any hard-coded value in our project, so we need to think about how we can add the credentials for the APIs inside our project or use it using as an environment variable. And after that, we need to find or think about solution to inject these environment variables locally or on Bitrise. How we can inject the environment variables by passing the values or the correct values from our API's information. And then we can run the test after that locally or on Bitrise as we want. So first, enable TestRail API. So you can go to the TestRail management or administration tool, and under the site setting, you can find the API section. And under the API, you can just check on enable API and save the settings to be able to connect with the API or with the TestRail API from our code. Then in your account, or even if you are administrator or anyone else, like a project manager or anything, so you can just under your setting, you can enable the API keys. So just add one key, it will be generated, or it will be generate one API key, and after that, save the setting, you can copy it and put it as an environment variable. So this is the first step from TestRail. Then we need to find a way to integrate the TestRail API client using our implementation. But actually, if we open the official documentation from TestRail APIs, we will not find any client that supports Swift as a programming language. You will find Java, you will find the C#, and so on, but you can't find something for Swift. Because that here we are talking about QuestTrain. QuestTrain is an open source framework. It's in GitHub, and it's created to allowing us to interacting with TestRail APIs. Something it's like a wrapper using TestRail API, but it's using Swift for sure to be able to use it with our XCUITest project. And also it supports iOS, macOS, tvOS, and watchOS. How we can install it? Just in a small step, if you are using Carthage, so you can just put this link inside your cart file. Or if you are using CocoaBot, so you can just add this one in the bot file, and just you can set up it, and it will install it. And just if you wanted to use it or the usage inside the project, just you can use let object API or take one object from the object API. And after that, you are passing the credentials that we were talking about in the previous slide. Your name, this is your email usually, your secret or your APK or API key that we generated in our application, and your instance or the URL of the TestRail, and the port and the schema is by default. We didn't change anything, or we don't change anything in this one. And inside our project, how we can map the test cases ID to the TestRail ID. For example, here, we have two functions. This one, for example, we have assert, and this assert should be fail. So this is from the name of the test function. And we are using something called the XCT context, which is from this framework, and .run activity, which is make us to take the error stack or any message or anything during our run and post it to TestRail test case. And after that, so this is for sending the error stack from the context if the test is failed. And also this one for adding the TestRail ID. For example, if you have test case with number 3, so you can add test case or TestRail ID here. And also we have the ability to add multiple test cases that I mentioned in the previous slide. So for example, here you can add array of numbers, and here adding multiple TestRail IDs with the same test function. So we will update 4 of the test cases on TestRail with one function or with one result. Run the test locally. To be able to run the test locally, we have 4 steps. First one, we have here one file in our solution. It's called the struct, or this is a struct file, and we are putting the environment variables inside this file. For example, we are adding enable TestRail, yes or no. So we need to apply, shall we send the result to TestRail or not? For example, if you are running locally and we don't need to create new run on TestRail and update the test cases, so we can't disable it on local runs, and running it only on the CI like Bitrise. And also adding the TestRail username, secret key, and the host name as an environment variable. And this should be the schema to be able to inject the environment variable after that. And from your command line, you can add the environment variables in your machine. Then you need to install a variable injector. This is also an open source project, and you can find it on GitHub. And you can just put it. This is also another script, so we can run the install binary to install the variable injector in our project. And then we can use this simple command line variable injector and passing the file name. So the file name is located in the shared folder, and this is the CI Swift file. And after that, you will notice that these variables are reflecting or are changed to the values that you entered in the environment variables. Then you can build your application normally from the command line or run the test from the command line using Xcode build, or you can run it from Xcode if you want. And this is the 4 steps, or this is the only 4 steps if you wanted to run it locally. Then what about Bitrise? So in Bitrise, we will try to mimic these steps or try to transform these steps to Bitrise workflow. So here we have a normal workflow, like clone the repository, caching the repository, and after that we have this step. And this step is doing the magic for us. So Swift environment variable injector, we are putting it. This is a predefined step on Bitrise, and you can putting it in your workflow. And after that, here you can passing the version that you need to use from this injector. And here the path of the Swift file that you need to inject the variables from the environment variables inside this file. For example, here the Bitrise source directory, which is the project, or which is our project. And then this is a file Swift that we are injecting the environment variables to it. And also in Bitrise, we have environment variables. We can add these environment variables that we added in our local machine, like enable TesRail, TesRail username, secret, and the host name. This is the simple idea about the integration. So let's now go to the putting it all together and check our demo. So here I have, I record 2 videos, but I will talking on this is for Bitrise, and let's run it in the local first. So this is our project. So I can maximize, sorry. So this is mainly our project, and here we have our simple test case, and here we have the test base. Test base only is including the launch application. So we have here just to set up our application launch. And here we have different functions, and in each function we are passing the XCT context.run activity, which is the one library here from the QuestTrain project, and you can use it for just sending the result to TesRail. And here, this is, for example, you can add any code related to Xcode or anything inside this block of code. And then also we are adding here the test number or the test case name or testing, just one. And if you have more, then you can just add arrays of numbers, something like this one. So here we can adding arrays of numbers, and this one will be update 4 test cases on TesRail. And then if you open the test cases, so this is the TesRail, and we have here 5 test cases. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And also one more additional information about this one. If we add a wrong number of the TesRail case ID, this result will not be added in the TesRail, because we will have warning that this ID of the test case is not exist in the TesRail or is not exist in your project. So here we just check the result, and here, so this test will not be run or not, we will not send the result to TesRail. And here's the test manager, and here we are adding from the QuestTrain, and here we are adding our object. So here TesRail setup started, and let or take one object from the TesRail. So, and adding CI.TesRail. So here we are adding as environment variables. So because that we have a CI file, and adding the environment variables from, or adding them from this file. So if we open the CI file, for example, here, if we click on jump to definition, so we will find the one that we found in the presentation. We are enable TesRail, or we are adding enable it or disable it as we want, and adding these variables. And this file will be changed after we run the test. And the environment variable also, we have one additional file to be able to inject these files from the environment variables to be able to use it in our project. This only if we wanted to run these test cases on local devices. But if we are just assuming that we will run nightly build on Bitrise, so we don't need to do all these things in our project. And this, the file that we are using, or this is the wrapper from the library QuestTrain And here we are using the XCUITest observations to send the result when the test bundle is started or when the test bundle is finished, and so on. And here we have one additional command. If ci.enable is yes, so we can submit the result to TestRail. If not, we will print this one. Submitting result is disabled because it is not a CI build. So here is the if condition based on the environment variables that we add. Then we can just jump to the result after I adding the environment variables on my machine. So I will start like injector or add inject. So here I can just inject or variable injector the file in the shared CI Swift file. So here after injecting, so I can stop the video here. So after I run the command, I found the credential is it changed or the inject is working and inject the variables inside my file. So here this is the variable enable yes and my credentials and my URL. And also if I open the file, that I will find that it is changed in the file, and also I can't commit or I don't need to commit these changes in the CI. And after that, I can run the command line for Xcode builder to be able to run the application or build the application for test and then running it. So just I need to mention that we have the test manager, TestRail setup started and completed. And after we running the test, we can also check if we can go through quickly. And here after we finish running the test cases, we have here plan creation started. So we start created plan on TestRail, test plan, like a test suite, and adding the IDs of the test cases that we have inside this plan. And this is the URL for our result. So we can just open this one and hit this URL and open it. And we have 5 test cases. But if you go through our application, you can find that we have 6 test cases, but we have one with wrong IDs. So here we can find also in this result that we have this message displayed. So here we have a warning. The following results are for invalid case ID. So if you are passing any invalid case ID, for example, not exist, or any wrong ID, so this result will not be submitted to TestRail. So this is mainly about the running the test. And if we open one for Bitrise, and Bitrise, this is our repository, and we don't have any problem in that. And this is a big bucket, and we have here the installation or the sh file that we are installing the variable injector inside project. And here on Bitrise, we have one workflow. We have the Swift environment variable injector, and here we are passing, as we said see in the presentation, this is the file. And also here we have the normal build for building the application for test. And here for this is the environment variables that we need. So for example, here we can add we can say yes or no, and after that saving the credentials. And also here we are running the build normally, so I just run 2 builds, and here we can find the Swift injector is already injected the values inside our project. So here we have the values injected successfully inside our project, and we can use it directly. So here also we can find the result, that the result is submitting into TestRail. And also if we have something is called, for example, if we change the environment variable to no, so it's displaying that is not a CI, for example, if we wanted to try it. And then if we open TestRail, so you can find here under the test runs and result, you can find the result submitted, and you can open the master plan, and we have here 5 test cases with 2 failed test cases. And if we open any failed test cases, you can find the result. So for example, here, if I open the TestRail just to one more thing to check the result, here we can find the plan that we created. And if we open the master plan and click on this field, so here what I mentioned from run activity, so we are sending the error message to TestRail to know from the manual test cases or from TestRail what happened during the test automation script. So this is the main idea about the integration between Bitrise, TestRail, and XCUITest. And thank you. I hope that I don't have run time. And also you can find here the references for the project or the Swift injectors that I'm using. So I can send it to in the chat. And yeah, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's see if we have any questions in the meantime. While you were presenting, we did get a message from Suad Batis about a Slack link. Could you let us know what you were looking for there? Because I'm not actually sure. But other than that, nothing yet. Let's just wait a second. Oh, Mohammed is asking, can we use that with Cucumber?
I think so, because I didn't try Cucumber with Swift or XCUITest, but if there is already a Cucumber for Swift, so you can integrate it, because at the end you need to add your test case inside the block for run activity. So just you need to send the result to TestRail. So, and after that you can add anything related to Swift or anything related to XCUITest.
All right. Okay. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then thank you again, Moataz. Awesome stuff. And
I will send the links also here in the chat to be able to.
Yeah, that's Mohammed is actually asking whether you could explain a little bit more about the Cucumber question.
So, as I know, I didn't try Cucumber with XCUITest, but if we have already, or if you have a code using XCUITest and Cucumber, you can use it, because at the end, if you have a block of code using Cucumber and XCUITest, you just need to put it inside one run activity, because the TestRail API is using this one to send the result. So if you have any block, you just put it your code inside XC context and just put it .run activity and adding the TestRail IDs and adding anything related to your code. So it doesn't matter inside this one, it will be sending the result to TestRail.
All right. In the meantime, okay, Sue's also asking, could you give us some experience on GitHub iOS plus Appium?
Did you mean GitHub Actions?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Actually, Appium, you can run Appium. I have already one repo to set up Appium on GitHub Actions. Maybe I can find it and send it in the channel. But at the end, the idea about the Appium, that Appium contains the two Appium desktop and Appium server. So inside GitHub Actions or any CI, so you can't find any UI. So you need to run Appium from Node.js, and you need to have like machine with Node.js and install Appium like in silent mode and run the server. And after that, you can like link your test as default from your project, and it will work.
All right. In the meantime, I am posting the Slack channel that we have for the book, because that was one of the questions. So we do have a dedicated Slack channel where we can continue the discussions if we have any more questions. So in the meantime, Mohammed's asking, can we run Android on Bitrise?
For sure, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, Bitrise is supporting all the mobile applications: Android, iOS, Flutter, Xamarin, and React Native. So you can just, in few steps, try it, and you can have a free account also for 30 minutes, as I remember. And in few steps, you can run Android. But did you mean running a test or running the application in general? So, but you will find all supports for Android for sure on Bitrise. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look for the link says the Slack channel is no longer active. I'll look into that until we do the next presentation. So sorry about that. There was also a question from Abraham Abreu. How can we do it on-premise cases?
About running on TestRail, or what? This one?
Yes.
So as I mentioned, just this I did it in locally and in environment variable to not adding the hard-coded values inside our project. So you need to add your credentials for the API for TestRail, adding as an environment variable, inject them in the file, and after that you can use it from Xcode, from the UI tool, or from Xcode, or from the command line from Xcode build. So this is for running locally or on-premise cases. But actually, we don't need. This is the idea about we don't need to push the credentials on any repositories on the internet. This is like a best practice or recommendation that you didn't or you can't push any credentials on any source code. So because that we are injecting them, and we will reverse this change, and after that we just push the changes or other changes on this one.
All right. Awesome. Yes, I'm so sorry about the link. I am actually getting a new one. I'll be able to post it in just a second. Yes, and no, the link doesn't, but here is the one that does. So sorry about that again. Okay. Great. So thank you again, Moataz. And let's move on to our next presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So next up is Manuel Carrasco Molina, better known as Stuff MC, who is a professional software developer with over 30 years of experience, based in Durham, Germany. He founded the first French podcast about Apple in 2005 and dove into iOS development at the launch of the SDK in 2008 after spending the first half of his developer career with Microsoft Technologies. He also ran ObjectiveCGN.com/SwiftConf from 2012 to 2017. And Stuff, you're here. Everything okay? Are you with us? We can't hear you yet. Stuff's presentation is titled Privacy on iOS, What You Should Know and Do. So just a second. Yes, awesome. All right.
Yeah.
All
right. So I guess I can then share my screen. And
yep, sure.
This, I just need to find the right file. That should be this one. And you should see my screen now. If I go full screen, I think everything should be good. Yep. I will just, yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about privacy. I don't know why this thing is moving from itself without me touching it. But yeah, so I'll start with a little bit about me, because the reason why I'm interested in privacy has a little bit to do about who and why I am. So I'm a French-speaking Spanish guy born in Belgium, living in Germany for the last 17 years, which means that I love Europe a lot. I have about 23 years of experience as a dev, which makes me a little bit of a dinosaur. Certainly almost dead from my kids with that age, and I've spent half of my career with the Apple techs. So I love my iPhone as well. I have 9 years of political involvement with the Green Party. So besides being a full-time developer, I am an actual politician, and this is one of my motivation behind this whole privacy and energy optimization, which is my other thing. I also have 5 years of climate and refugee activism, so it means I hang out in some forests sometimes and fight against cold, and I'm also refugees welcome activist. I have 6 years without meat, and half of it being a vegan, so which is another thing of my ethic thing. Why am I telling you all of this? Well, because this is about ethics, ethics for the win. This talk is basically about karma, and this is why I actually called my book Karma-Based API on Apple platforms. Originally, it was going to be the subtitle, and April thought it was better to make it a title, and the subtitle being Building Privacy into iOS and macOS Apps. So this is the QR code to get the book. I released this book last year around, I think, October, November. So it's sold with iOS 13 and obviously 12 as well in the book. And today we're going to speak a little bit about iOS 14, which is not in the book, obviously. So what we'll cover is basically photos and cameras, location and medkits, and also a little bit of contacts. We'll see if it's about 20 minutes, if it's shorter, if it's longer. I usually give this talk for about an hour, but I made a special talk for you today, guys. So what we won't speak about, but which is in the book, which you can see by that screenshot, is the calendar and events, which is a little bit of an API which Apple has really like almost left alone for the last years. It's very old. Health and fitness, which is certainly very interesting, especially given all the new stuff and also the COVID stuff and stuff like that. Siri and search, which is really interesting and really big, and I thought I was going to write 4 pages about this. I ended up writing 40 pages about this in the book. And HomeKit, which is now available on the Mac. That's a good thing, because me and a friend of mine, we built an app called Solar Dashboard, because I'm also interested in photovoltaic, and we were a little bit sad that in Catalyst we couldn't use HomeKit because we're basically like switching your plugs if the sun is shining, basically, and now it's available. So this thing you see on the right, by the way, is an app, is like a companion app to the book that I wrote, which is called My Privacy, and it's just a little bit a small app where I play around with different APIs. You can find it on GitHub. Just look at the page of the book. You don't have to buy the book to check out the app, but that would be great if you buy the book. Right, a little bit about the versions discussion. This talk, just like the book, assumes that you are building for at least iOS 11. Anything else, really, you should stop building for it. Ideally, you should build for iOS 13 if you can. And yes, of course, we'll look at iOS 14. In terms of macOS, ideally, you should build for 10.15, but we might talk a little bit about Big Sur and macOS 11, although it's more a talk about iOS, obviously. All right, first thing, very important, the strings. It's all in info plist. You will need to write a little bit of text, so you explain to your users what you're going to do with this. And in my app, in this example, because I'm testing all the privacy API, I have a lot of strings. You will most probably not have that much about privacy in your app, but you will have a little bit of whatever, location and photos and camera and maybe health and whatever. So let's start with photos, and let's look at photos, because if you ask me, the number one thing that a mobile phone needs to have nowadays is actually a very good camera, and so it's important. So how do you access the library? Well, 2 things. Until now, that means until iOS 13, and that for a long time, you had the option to have this not determined, which means we don't know yet. Restricted means your user is potentially one of my kids, for example, or somebody which is controlled by a company, a policy, or whatever. Denied is the user actually said no, and authorized, the user said yes. And limited is new and shiny in iOS 14, and we'll come back to that. And limited is actually really great. Right, and speaking of limited, there's this thing which pops in front of you in iOS 14 every time you restart your app, and you don't have control to that as a developer, except if you put in your info plist, we're back to the info plist, this thing called PH Photo Library Prevent Automatically Limited Access Alert, yes, through your application info plist. It doesn't mean, though, that the user will have full access. No, not at all. Because it will still restrain to the selected photos, but it will mean that it will always be the current selection. I really don't recommend to do this, because I would hate it myself as a user that you don't give me the option to reselect photos. For example, the way I use Instagram, now I haven't given the full access in the past, is that I reselect a couple of photos every time. All right, so what you can do is you can pick one up until now, iOS 14, with UI image picker controller. This guy is in UIKit. What? And over there you select if you want to have access to the photo library, the camera, or the saved photo albums, and then you use a delegate. Old schoolish, but it works. You present this on your current view controller, and then you end up in this delegate, which is image picker controller did finish picking media with info, where you basically will have a couple of stuff. You will have an original image, potentially an edited image, an image URL, a couple of stuff like the PH asset. But PH asset, as it says, it will be removed in the future release. You should use PH picker. I'm not going to go too much in the PH picker, but I'm just going to talk to you about this right now, and we're going to import another framework which is called Photos UI. Well, Photos UI is not new; it was there, but basically they changed everything in iOS 14, which is very interesting. One of the things they do it now is they have this limited thing. So you can present this limited library picker, which comes directly to your face if you don't change your code. You can present it yourself in your code in iOS 14. So with this, actually. And so the user will see, will have an option to select thing. And by the way, for the first time in iOS 14, the user will be able to select more than one photo because the picker view controller actually only allows you to select one photo. So it's new in iOS 14. It finally has multiple selections, which is awesome. Again, it has also a built-in preview. So once you select those four that I selected, you click on View Selected, and then you can swipe them actually, which is really cool. Also, you can search. So it's really amazing actually. All right, let's move on to core location, the second thing. So this is what you see since iOS 13. And the new thing I will talk about this is allow once. If you still have an app which is built on iOS 12, you won't see the allow once. You will see allow while using the app, and you might see also always allow. Let's start by speaking about the battery. So I'll save the battery and at the same time a little bit of the planet. You should, instead of using start stop location, if you just need one specific point of location, and it's not only about battery, it's obviously also about privacy, you should just use request location, because request basically will get you one location. If you do have to use start location, as I mentioned it in the footer, with a link to one of my privacy talk, my energy talks, you should not forget to stop it when you get enough of the information from the user. Region monitoring, you could use it instead of checking location, but I will come back on the subject of region monitoring also. You should lower the location accuracy to 3 km if you can. This is a slide which is pre-iOS 14, but it's still valid. And also, not everybody will be able to build right now an iOS 14 app, right? So this is why I'm telling you a lot of stuff about iOS 13 and potentially even less. All right, the authorization. This is the way it would work today if you write a code which will work at one point on iOS 14. Previously, we got the authorization status as a class func, and now it became an instance property. Actually, they call it property, but it's an instance method. And so this is a little bit funky, but we are in this transition period where it's actually the way you have to go. All right, the statuses. They look a lot like the photo ones, obviously. Not determined, restricted, denied, except they have authorized always and authorized when in use, which is over there since iOS 11. If you, iOS 8, sorry, if you still have an authorized, I would recommend to really remove it. But Apple have said they will deprecate this, and for whatever reason, a lot of time Apple marks stuff as deprecated for like whatever 10 years before they actually get rid of it. All right, I spoke about iOS 14 and 13 and sometimes about 12. It's very confusing. The allow once thing arrived in iOS 13. The region monitoring needs always in iOS 12. So if your app is still running under iOS 12, it means even if region monitoring is used while your app is used, you will need to have always, which is the reason why up until very recently, a lot of developers actually requested always that, like from the beginning on. And privacy-wise, it's actually obviously a catastrophe, right? Because I don't want apps to have all the time access to my device for two reasons: privacy and energy. I don't want my battery to be drained. I don't want that little arrow to be shown, which you can find in the settings, that tells me an app is using my location. I don't even know which app it is. So myself, I hope a lot of users, I am very, very, I even use allow once a lot in the meantime, actually, and so should you. So be prepared for that as a developer. And yes, it's a mess, the 13, 30, the 12, 13, 14 thingy, but it's going to be even worse in a couple of minutes. So my recommendation is every year, try to move to the current, in this case, iOS 13, so not the beta. every year, I'm missing a word over there, just after dub. Why just after dub? Because after dub, you know what still works in iOS 13, right? You know what is not deprecated, right? So, and also just after dub, or just before in this case, you know the adoption is actually very high. Like nowadays, it's like, I think it's 90% or 92%. It's around 90% of iOS 13. It's going to take a little bit of time. Good thing is, once in a while, this year, this is the case. The version is supported on the same devices than the previous version. So iOS 14 will run on every single device which runs iOS 13. iOS 14 will run on iOS 13 devices. It wasn't the case last year because remember when iOS 13 arrived, they dropped support on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, obviously, and SE. So this year, it should be way easier to go to iOS 14. And also, it's your chance to clean the code, right? Because once a year, at least once a year, you need to have a couple of sprints, at least 2 sprints. You need to get that from your manager. I don't know how, but get it. You know, just like it's very important to talk about testing, which we just had with Nabil. It's also very important to talk about security. And please, please do me a favor, stop your manager's futuritis and like pull up the handbrake nowadays and now and then and just tell them this, we need to do this, right? And try to lower basically the financial debt because you will have financial debt at one point. All right, let's talk about accuracy. So basically there's this thing called the location accuracy, which is this set of static variables. Not really sure why it's not an enum. And there's also the location speed accuracy. So one is about the location service that will try to do its best to achieve your desired accuracy. And as you can see, and as you can imagine, the more it is accurate, the less it is private, and also the more it will drain your battery, right? Because the chip used to get the very detailed location will be actually the GPS chip, which is consuming more power than the Wi-Fi chip, and so on and so forth. Right, and this year, actually, you can make a wish sometimes, especially when you write books. Last year, when I wrote a book, I wrote somewhere in the book, there's neither a way for the user to select this accuracy nor a way to tell what an app requires. It would probably be a terrible UI and a few more edge cases for a developer, but feel free to make a suggestion to Apple about any of those privacy concerns. And by the way, do that all the time, please. Use the feedback reporter, report bugs. Apple listens to us and fix the bugs sometime, not all the time. All right, so less accuracy, as I was telling you, is more privacy, and it's also less battery drain. So the location you receive will match the locations your app would have received if the user has decided not to grant your app authorization for precise location. This is when you use this new thing in iOS 14 called location accuracy reduced, basically. So it's basically, that is an app, that is you as an app, that says from the beginning on, I don't need my location to be very precise. You know, I give you an example, weather apps. I mean, it's not important for a weather app to know that I live in my street. It's enough if this weather app knows that I live in my city, right? So what about this thing? So it's full or reduced, right? There's a new thing which is an accuracy authorization. And it has 2 values: full accuracy, where it's basically the user's permission to receive accurate location. So this is all up until now, iOS 13. And the second one, we'll speak about that in the next slide. And also, please tell me if you understand why Apple sometimes brings us, and I'm sure there is a reason, I knew it, but I forgot, why there is an is authorized for precise location, which is introduced but already deprecated. So don't use it. All right, so the reduced thing is 5 kilometers. You remember, up until now, the least you could have was 3 kilometers. They say that the user has chosen to grant application, and they say a couple of stuff. One is the region monitoring and beacon ranging are not available to the application. Good to know. If you're using region monitoring and beacon ranging, you cannot use reduce accuracy, which is kind of obvious because especially beacon ranging is really, it needs to be very super precise, like, you know, at the meter, right? And region monitoring needs to be more than 5 kilometers anyways, because, and also the important thing to know is that the application should be prepared to receive locations that are up to 20 minutes old. Wow. So it depends what kind of apps you do. But again, weather apps, no needs to update the weather more than every 30 minutes. I couldn't care less because anyways, weather predictions, Whatever. All right, so let's go to 2 screenshots. This is on the left, the way Maps is doing it in iOS 14, and as you can see, they ask you to use your precise location right from the beginning on. And so if you say yes, then you will see it on the top, but you can change it. That's a good thing about it. You can change your precise thing. On your app, you could have also this little banner-y thingy on the top left that will tell you if you want to use the precise location, yes or no. So this blue dot, which you see on the right, will turn to a bigger, like a circle, that will show you like 5 kilometers, right? And also, if you move around, you will see they did an amazing demo at that actually the circle will not follow you, right? The circle will just basically, whenever you are not in the circle anymore, the circle will move, right? So that makes sense, actually. That's a little bit of funky animation for you in a PDF. And now let's finish with the contacts. Right, so the contacts is really the framework with which I started actually way at the beginning with iPhone OS 2. I remember one of my first apps that I built used the contacts API. Back in the day, by the way, it was called the address book API, and it was in C. Yes, no, it wasn't cool. So I really like it, and especially what's more private than a contact actually. So whenever I speak about contacts and also the book, I always have this emphasis of the good, the bad, and you can imagine what's the third one. So the good developer would be the developer which would ask to have just the name and the family name, like, you know, the first name and the last name. That's the only information I need to know, right? People need to know what's my first and last name, right? They don't need to know where I live or whatever else or what's my phone number. And then what I would do is I will call this predicate, which I will show you on the next slide. The second one would be the bad developer. The bad developer will still have a predicate, which I will show you the predicate thing, which has nothing to do with the descriptors. Descriptors are basically a bunch of properties. And as you can see on the right, this is a bunch of properties. This is basically all the properties, all the freaking properties, everything I can know. So whenever an app asks you to have access to your address book, basically try to say no. Well, actually, I mostly don't give any access to any apps except the system apps. So the predicate is I ask basically in my privacy app to give me a name pattern. I want to search someone like everybody called Bell. You know, like there is this example of Kate Bell. And the code behind it is basically I show up an alert controller, I add a text field, and basically I call my function allow with this predicate matching the name this and that, right? And allow is basically requesting access for all the contacts and making a fetch request, and then I access the unified contacts, right? The ugly developer, this guy really should, or this person should, we're almost done, so I will stop this. Will actually access to all of your contacts. The problem is there isn't, as a developer, as a user, there is no way to know that an app is doing this. Actually, you know what? I could even ask this, right? And then I could do this. That is the problem, right? So they're not done yet with this is why I was saying State of the Union. Privacy, they did a lot of stuff this year, but they're not done yet. So let's finish with the contact picker, because there are two kind of ways in the meantime. The contact picker is not new in iOS 14. It has existed since a couple of years. It's basically an out-of-process picker. So whenever you see this guy, you won't see a permission asking you to have access to your address book, because the app won't have. The app will have access to that single picked contact or a couple of contacts picker. So you show it, you put a delegate, and you present it. And then the reason why I do this sender tag like =1 is it's kind of tricky, because the moment you implement the contacts with an S, the single contact won't be there anymore. So if you need an option to, for whatever reason, to show I only want to select one contact or multiple contact, then you have to have two controllers. So new-ish in iOS 14 is this thing which you see on the bottom, right? Well, actually new-ish, because this is not new. Actually, you could already put text content type on all of your text fields or text views, right? The only thing is the system wouldn't do anything with your app about it. Now it actually does the proactive keyboard, so it shows you the address. It's basically what they call autofill every year. Think about granularity, so it means if you don't need the full street address, where they're at again, just put the address city, right? And then the privacy behind it is the user will just tap on the bar, the autofill bar, and it's just the text that will be copied. I really love this one because it's not even a contact. It's not even access to a contact, right? It is an access. It's basically just the text, right? All right, let's close this with references. Where do I get all this stuff? Well, like everybody else, I watch Dub. So this year, this is only this year, right? This is only Dub 20. We had so many. The bigger one, like the one that englobes all the ones, is called Build Trust Through Better Privacy. So then there are a couple of smaller ones, designed for location privacy, handle the limited photo library in your app, meet the new photos picker, also, and what's new in location, and autofill everywhere. Also look for the word privacy at all the past dubs, because as Apple has been giving a lot of stuff of focus on privacy since many years actually. And with that, it's not because we had Nabil before that I'm putting Arabic, but it's because I do speak and write a little bit of Arabic that says thank you. And if there are any questions, just find me on Twitter, StuffMC, or you drop me an email. And yeah, that's it for now. So let's see if there are any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stuff. That was awesome.
Do I need to stop my screen myself, or did you do this?
Oh, I can. It's fine. I can.
Okay. I can do it myself.
Yep. No, it's fine. So we did get one question. In the meantime, will there be a recording of this shared after? Yes. This is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have some other ones. No problem, Amanda.
It usually takes a little bit of a few seconds for the people to
think
about the questions.
No worries. Yeah, multiple people are typing. So
right, typing. Yeah.
Yeah.
If there is no question, it's also I'm cool also with that. It's what's also I can actually share this presentation. So I will most probably put it on DeckSet. Oh, there was a link to my not DeckSet but Speaker Deck. Sorry. So I am on Speaker Deck. I will most probably put this presentation after. Or actually, I will put it on Speaker Deck, and so you can find the links over there. But basically, you should all get the developer app or just go on the website of Apple. The only thing that I should mention, though, it's kind of sad. Well, this year's Dub, they have a great thing, which is copy the code from the slides, basically, which is really great. The downside is they apparently don't put the slides anymore from Dub. So it's kind of weird. What's my thought on the new privacy transparency on App Store? Yeah, so this is something I was thinking about speaking about because I could just show a couple of screenshots, and I really like this. I mean, to be honest, it reminds me a little bit of Android. It's always funny to say that when you speak about privacy. When there was basically, a couple of years ago when you installed an app on Android, you had all the access summarized in one panel, and so yeah, whatever Apple does to basically show what an app is doing. And the funny thing is, a lot of developers, and I would say the bad developers, will be surprised by this, because then all of a sudden you realize, this app is browsing my network for whatever reason, or this app is using my Bluetooth. I mean, last year it was Bluetooth. Facebook was using it for whatever reason. This year it was browsing my local network. So whatever Apple does to be between the developers and the user, it's always good for the user.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Khoa and Shams, for the questions. If we're good, then thank you so much again, Stuff.
You're welcome.
And
have a great panel, and see you all on Twitter.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers. So next up, our last point of agenda in today's webinar is our panel discussion for WWDC 2020. Joining us today are Alexander Botkin, Khoa Pham, and Shams Ahmed. Just a second, and everyone should be able to join. All right, a quick round of introductions while everyone gets settled in. Alexander Botkin is a principal engineer at ChargePoint, where he works with mobile apps to help EV drivers find charging stations. Previously worked at Apple as part of their iOS apps and frameworks team for 3 years, and Gannett/USA Today. Khoa is an iOS developer based in Oslo, Norway. He's an avid open source contributor, blogger, and occasional speaker. He's the author of LearnTugs.com and WWDCtogether.com. And Shams is an iOS SDK developer at Bitrise. He specializes in iOS development with experience in apps and SDKs. He is also co-organizer of NSL London Meetup, community of iOS/macOS developers. All right. Hey, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
All right. How are you doing, guys?
Morning.
So, WWDC 2020. Let's get this show on the road. Just a quick lighthearted discussion. First and foremost, did you guys like it? Was it a disappointment? What was your favorite thing in all of it? I will switch us over to a view. So, just your general thoughts. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll start off. So what was that? I thought this year was pretty good. I really liked the format of the videos. In past years, because WW is in person, a lot of the slots can be very long, like 45 minutes, sometimes an hour. And for some sessions, that makes a lot of sense, especially for the new features. But for some of the other sessions, these smaller, like 15, 25-minute kind of focused sessions, I personally like that format a bit more because it kind of got right to the heart of things and didn't kind of linger too long. I really like the fact that the Apple Developer app finally started allowing for some of those code alongs and being able to see the transcript at the same time. So that was a really nice feature this year. But from my side, like I think the big things I was excited about were, there was the CarPlay getting expanded for like parking and EV charging apps, which has been something a lot of people have been asking for. Plugin Kit is one that I'm particularly excited with, where they're bringing over some of the watchOS stuff over into the home screen. And then the other one was App Clips, I think was one of the big announcements that I was pretty excited about.
All right, cool. Shams, what about you?
I think the whole event overall went really well, given the current situation. They did a really good job. Videos were clear cut. It's flawless. Really enjoyed watching it in my own time. I like the fact that they kept it every day they released new videos. They didn't want to just put 15, 20 videos in one day and just overload developers. In terms of new technology, few things for me to use. From a developer's point of view, I think some small changes to just Swift UI. They call it Swift 2.0 or Swift UI 2.0. Small changes with Xcode code completion, debugging. It's quite helpful. It's very useful. I think for anyone that's doing like a lot of development work with Swift UI will really enjoy it. And I think in the next couple of years, once developers start, using ARM-based Macs, we should start seeing like some serious improvements in terms of like us doing development work to testing, performance and just having the user experience.
All right, cool. How about you?
Yeah, I was super excited. Like at first, I was wondering like what will the format of this year WWDC will be, and I thought that it will be live stream, like live on the stage. But I think I like the recorded format much better, and some of that's very hilarious. Like when Craig go to the upper stage, and I can see like the whole Apple Park is like a journey. And I agree with I like the short format looks much better. It is more focused and like focus on the contents. But somehow like I wish that the Swift UI sessions are a bit longer. Like I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And apart from that, one thing I really like is the new privacy and improvement in security and privacy in iOS 14. And that being said, I really like the talk by stuff, like all of the new stuff in the photos and the location and the context framework. And I think that will improve people privacy and awareness of their data in the future.
Right.
Yeah, because one thing that I think the talk didn't talk about, but was interesting that they brought up in the WWDC sessions this year, is that they're now going to start prompting people to give, there's like a privacy prompt that's going to happen for IDFA, the advertising identifier. And this is actually pushing some of the third-party analytic libraries like Firebase to kind of correct some of the ways they've been using IDFAs in the past. So if you've used Firebase, for example, tries to use the IDFA if it sees that your app pulls in add support.framework. And in past years, there's been some issues because the way they try and detect that you link in has some errors where if you use Safari services.framework, for example, it would think that you pulled in app support framework anyways and would grab the IDFA in your app. And a lot of developers didn't really know that. Now with that iOS 14 prompt, it's going to kind of push a lot of these analytic frameworks to be much more careful about when they grab that IDFA, because it's going to cause that nasty prompt within the app.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think overall, just like Apple have been very serious about privacy. We've seen it for the last 2 to 3 years, and this is only just going to improve. And I think it's a good thing. It's bad enough that developers are not aware of this. And now we can observe all these suspicious activities. We could actually decide: do we need to integrate with these services, or can we actually disable it moving forward?
Yeah. In the meantime, Manuel, Stuff also commented in the chat. Says, thanks, Alex, for reminding me about this IDFA thing. So, yeah.
One question I kind of have for the other panelists is, what did you guys end up using the WWDC labs this year, and what did you guys think? So I ended up, the WWDC labs, if people haven't been to the conference before, usually after some of the sessions happen, there's several hours kind of set aside as office hours, essentially, where you can go and talk to the speakers and other engineers within Apple to help debug issues or help you in trying to implement a new feature. This year, Apple basically had kind of an appointment system. So you had to, the day before, put in for an appointment, and then someone had to basically schedule your appointment. And for me personally, I signed up for 3 different labs. I ended up getting them all, but it was a very interesting process because one of the things is one of them I was initially denied the lab, but then 30 minutes before the time where I was going to have it, I all of a sudden got approved for it. And I know for other people, Apple used WebEx this year. And so a lot of people didn't realize right up until their lab that they needed to install WebEx. And WebEx, you have to go through all the privacy prompts and stuff. So I was kind of curious, did you guys use the labs? What did you think of the format? And did you find it helpful?
For me, I haven't been to any labs yet, so I can't really talk about it.
I didn't actually use the lab this year. But what I've heard from my teammates, it's been a pleasant experience. You can make a request a couple hours later. You would know if you've been approved for the session. It's compared to DubDub, previous years. You would be waiting in lines. You would have to book in advance and hope for the best that you actually get to speak to someone. This year has been very easy. I think I've not really heard anyone that's struggled getting a lab session. It's if worst case they may not be able to get something today, but applying the following day, it's not been a problem.
Yeah. I didn't go to any, but I think that's probably the best possible scenario that they could have come up with, this whole system, especially keeping in mind with everything going on. I think it was a nice way of doing things. Stuff in the meantime also commented in the chat that he signed up for about 10 or 15 labs, and he's actually attended 6, and he had a blast. So yeah, the overall experience seems to be very positive. Curious moving forward, well, it all depends on how things change, but it's a nice start, and we'll see how it goes in the future. Yeah.
And what was it? Apple added in the developer forums, so I'm kind of hoping that if people have questions, try and go into that developer forums. It seems like some Apple engineers are actually responding and answering questions. So I'm kind of hoping they keep doing that throughout the summer as people start hitting some of the kind of issues that kind of prevent them from being there on launch day. And I'm kind of hoping these labs that traditionally have always been in the WWDC conference week, it would be nice if Apple kind of spaced it out and had additional kind of office hours throughout the summer. But hopes and dreams.
Yeah, totally agree. I read on Twitter, like actually at the new Apple forum, some people don't have a good experience about that for now. Like you can change your avatar picture, and like if you pose a question or answer, you need to go through some privacy steps. But I hope that will be improved, and yeah, we can get to chat and get more answers from the real Apple engineers.
So, biggest question: what is the most impactful of like all of this when it comes to your development? Like, out of everything that you saw there, what would you say is number one?
I guess for me would be like it has to be on an everyday basis. It has to be like the debugging and the code completion support on Xcode. They've really gone like the extra mile to make sure like they're giving you additional information, not just something that's hard coded. What you see all the time is that actually are reading your code base, looking at the types that you any custom types you have, and making sure that you can follow it through to where the actual error is. This is something new, and it's going to take developers a bit of time to actually realize that it's actually very useful. The whole experience.
Yep. For me, I think one of the big things was I thought Plugin Kit had a lot of impact for 2 different reasons. The first one is this is one of the newer frameworks that's coming out that's Swift UI first. I think in the past years we had Create ML framework, the machine learning framework that was Swift only or whatnot, but you still could get to Core ML, I believe, with Objective-C. Now with Plugin Kit, if you're not going into Swift code at this point, you need to be in there if you want to use the new features. And one of the interesting things I thought about the way they did Plugin Kit is basically, for those who aren't familiar, Plugin Kit is basically almost replacing all those pre-iOS 14 widgets. So in the past, when you had one of those widgets in your Today view, basically the app was running behind the scenes. And so the app could do a whole lot of things, especially with analytic libraries, to be able to kind of record your interaction there. You were able to kind of have buttons. And so I think like the pCalc developer had a calculator in the Today widget views. Now with Plugin Kit, they're pushing more kind of that watch complication style, where basically your app has to basically provide a timeline for that widget. And your app's usually not going to be running all the time. You're not going to be able to capture analytic events about when your plugin's actually being displayed. Or was it? I think you won't be able to see it. But one of the things is it uses Swift UI for the thing. And then because of that timeline, you have to be very careful about your updates. So you have to take advantage of background app processing. And unlike with watch complications, one of the ways you would get around this in order to keep your data up to date for like anything that's coming from a server is you would end up using these watch push kit complication or push kit push notifications. And the push notifications were specific to the complications. And I think you had like a quota of 200 that you could use within a day in order to kind of update your complication. With this new widget kit stuff that's happening on iOS, you don't have the same push notification specific to that. So you're relying a lot more on silent push notifications, which are like rate limited to like 2 or 3 an hour. And you're also relying on getting background app processing time to do your updates, which I'm going to be curious to see if people kind of struggle with that a bit, because the system is going to kind of figure out how often it really needs to update. So I could see some apps where you're trying to show kind of status from a server having to play around quite a bit in order to find the right mix of silent push notifications and background app processing in order to keep themselves current.
And I do think this is a game changer for like users' point of view. Now they could just look at your app, your widget, for example, see data, see a nice UI, without having to keep launching an application, keep navigating. If they want to glance, they know it's up to date. Give or take a few minutes or 20 minutes or so, give or take. But it's something useful. I think for certain applications, this is going to be a game changer. Other applications where you want to show ads or you got content that's kind of expensive to fetch. It's if you could show like the headline, for example, and when they click on it, they're able to read further like detailed information about it. At the same time, developers know that it's actually working. I'm hoping that whatever happens, we as developers get insights from when a user has selected a widget and its content, and can we actually get details of what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, for me, I pretty much agree. Like, I think widgets and app clips will be like a game changer in the future. Like, so my friends, they even say that it is like the verge of a new revolution. And especially for me, it's important because I'm working in like an app agency here in Oslo, Norway, and we are making like a lot of apps for like user-facing apps, like used by millions of users. So I think app clips and widgets will help the user like see the information at a glance and very quickly and give more like a quicker experience for the users. So I think it will be like a huge thing in the future.
Yeah, I actually was wondering because we were talking about widgets, but what about app clips? What do you think?
I think we will see a lot more downloads. So this is, I guess, this is a gain for app makers, developers. You're not going to be stuck on just looking at a website. You can now just click on something, and I'm hoping it's that the whole experience will be like smooth. I know for example they got like a 10 MB limit per app clip, so that means I do think we have to be cautious of what we're integrating. I don't think you could put all your favorite SDKs in there. It's I'm sure there will be some constraints, but for most application, it's if you can get more coverage, why not?
And I think app clips will definitely help out, especially with like the Apple Maps app, for example. There's a lot of point of interest where you can see restaurants, you can see parking places and charging stations. And traditionally what's happened is in Apple Maps, on some of those points of interest, you scroll down and there's eventually find more info on blank app. And when you tap into it, it ends up you're going to a website or it goes over and deep links into the other app. I think now with app clips, you're going to see things like Apple Maps start to allow for using app clips to have launch into a smaller, more focused experience, so that maybe if a user is looking at a restaurant, they would click into the app clip to go immediately to ordering from that restaurant. And it should be a more fluid experience rather than constantly throwing people back and forth between to the website or into a deep link into the installed app. So it should be interesting. I'm also curious to see with future Apple products if app clips ends up living on in other things, because I think one of the things is app clips seems to focus a lot on QR codes and universal links. And one of the things everyone wonders about is if Apple ever goes down the AR glasses route, would this kind of technology also end up moving over into the glasses? Because we've seen Apple focus a lot on ARKit in iOS for the last few years. And this seems like an extension into that. And the other thing as well is I think there was an announcement this year about, improving ARKit with location APIs. I'd have to go back and look, but I feel like there was something about that this year. So there's a lot of things happening that may start paving the way for Apple glasses in the future.
Yeah, cool. So a quick interjection. We got a question from Samir. Anything new to look out for in Bitrise/app release for iOS 14?
Well, I guess for Bitrise, this is a great time for us to start integrating the new technology. From what I can say, it's I think once we can create infrastructure for us to have ARM machines, this should really help all the builds. You're talking about faster build times on a standard machine from running tests that are going to be reliable. They're not just going to be flaky because of weird issues with the simulator. It's should just run like a native Mac application. So for me, it is a good time. I think the next chart, well, whenever the ARM Macs come out, we should see some improvements.
Yeah, that kind of touches on the elephant in the room, right? The the transition to Apple Silicon, which is like everything that the internet has right now is just about that transition. Yeah, it's interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see how the whole industry changes based on that.
Actually, that was kind of interesting because right after the keynote, I rewatched the WWDC in 2017 when Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone, and there was a slide when he quotes a quote from Alan Kay about like everyone who is very passionate about software should make their own hardware, and like right after this the WWDC keynote, I see like Tim Cook introduced like Apple Silicon, which is like they're very dedicated into like a unified platforms for all of the iOS, macOS, and iPad OS. I think that's going to be interesting both for the users and for us as the developers.
Yeah.
Yep. And one thing one thing that's kind of interesting with the transition to Apple Silicon and kind of going with our Mac OS is I think we're going to start seeing kind of the death of Mac gaming at this point. Mac gaming was already kind of on its last legs with the kind of transition to 64-bit, and a lot of the kind of games on Steam kind of were still stuck in 32-bit and weren't playable in the last Mac OS release. Now that we're having iOS and iPad apps start to come over to Mac OS, I think we're going to start to see a lot of mobile gaming starting to invade the Mac, and I'm not sure game developers are going to focus on the Mac as much anymore, since it's going to be more work to do it. One other thing that was kind of interesting is, Apple's still pushing Catalyst, but SwiftUI also works on Mac OS now, and with iOS apps now coming to Mac OS as well without even using Catalyst, I'm going to be kind of curious to see if many developers keep moving forward with Catalyst. Catalyst had its place as, trying to create a more Mac-like experience for your iOS apps that are running on the Mac. But now I'm kind of curious if we're going to see developers kind of, take the easier way out, which might be just, focus on SwiftUI, or just, allow their iOS apps to run on Mac, but don't really focus on the platform and focus more on the mobile.
I think we'll see from the analytics on like how many of our users are actually running apps on Macs. This should help. This should definitely help the Mac App Store, which since the very start hasn't really been doing that well. I think for the short term, all these mobile game developers, are going to win. They now have a bigger audience. I'm sure there's going to be small changes to go from touches to keyboard use, for example. I don't know. I don't think hardcore gamers actually use Mac that often. I do see a future, but I reckon you're looking about cloud gaming. What Google's been doing a lot in the past, something similar, or some hybrid approach. Who knows? But I don't think.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that potentially, like in my hopes, this also means that there's going to be like more complex and less mobile-like mobile games on like mobile, perhaps, because like taking into account that you're also designing it for an Mac, you know, that's always that's a hope of mine. But yeah, sorry, go ahead. Okay, yeah.
Was it one last thing I was going to mention is now with the transition, kind of boot camp is going away. So I'm going to be kind of curious to see if developers miss being able to run Windows natively on Mac laptops. I think there's a feature some people use, but I'm not sure it's that popular, to be honest. So any thoughts about the loss of kind of boot camp? It seems like, my understanding is like Windows for ARM is not even licensed to anyone other than OEMs. So there doesn't really seem a path to Windows right now on the Apple Silicon.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that people are just gonna forget. They're like, oh yeah, I used to have Windows when I first got my Mac. Now just don't use it. But the way Microsoft going, having support for Linux, I'm pretty sure there will be some form of a bridge or some alternative solution that will have the same behavioral experience. From what I can tell, I don't think VMware or anything similar will have support for it in the future. Not out the box right now, if I'm correct.
Stuff is saying in the meantime that Boot Camp is going away because Apple invests a lot in virtualizing, which is, anyways, the way people run Windows on their Mac. That's one of the reasons. Yeah. And yeah, he also mentioned that like you have to remember that ARM has been around for a while now. Because like it was like in 2010 or 2009 when they first started using it, and I think this is like the third switch overall, if I remember correctly. So yeah. All right, we are running out of time. I did want to ask you about the CarPlay, Alex, because you seem to be really into that. Like, if you could, say a few words about like, what do you think about it?
So, one of the things that Apple glossed over a bit in their keynote is they're doing a lot more to try and do more integrations, both in CarPlay as well as with the car. So Apple Maps app is adding EV routing. That EV routing is only going to work if you have your phone connected to one of these new cars. Like my understanding is like the BMW i4 and I think like the Mustang Mach-E that we're going to have support for this. And if you were paired to that car, then you'll get EV routing in Apple Maps. But otherwise, if you go into the iOS 14 beta and you try and do EV routing from Apple Maps, you can't do it. So it's kind of interesting. The reason it seems that they've done that is because they're going to allow the cars to provide information back to Apple Maps in terms of your battery level, as well as the connectors that your car can connect to at an EV charging station to help filter which stations you should go to. But for CarPlay, Apple has expanded a bunch the categories in the past. There's been audio apps on CarPlay. There has been the navigation apps, which has been specifically for the Google Maps and the Wazes of the world, where they have their own tile systems and do on-route navigation. But a lot of other apps like parking apps specifically and EV charging apps have been kind of frozen out of CarPlay in the past. So in order to develop into CarPlay, you have to get approval from Apple, and Apple provides you with a special entitlement in order to launch there. And the reason for that is Apple wants to control that experience, make sure that quality apps come out that aren't going to distract the driver while they're going through. And the way CarPlay apps tend to work is they have templates. And so a lot of these the app developer doesn't have as much control of the UI. They basically have a template where they can manipulate certain things like, hey, I want to provide a list. Here are the list items I want to show with the title and the subtitle. And then CarPlay basically handles the whole interaction of, okay, this can be scrolled by using this dial on the car, or this car has a touchscreen, and so you can just swipe on it. CarPlay handles that, and that's why they have the templates. One of the big changes that they talked about is in CarPlay, they have a point of interest template now where you can basically see a map, and then you'll be able to see through, like, I think there was 12 or so points of interest. So they'll show their pin. The app developers can customize the icon of that pin, and they'll be able to provide the data of the points of interest in the list. When you tap that, one of those points of interest, they'll be able to use an information template in order to provide some information about, say, if it's an EV charging station, they'll be able to provide, hey, here are the connectors, here's how fast it is. If it's like a restaurant, they could provide the hours and then let you know if they do die and taken. And I believe they also provide 2 buttons that the app could use in order to do things like, be able to start a charge at an EV charging station, be able to open the gate to a parking garage, things like that. So it's kind of, Apple's kind of pushing forward with CarPlay. It's going to be kind of an interesting year to see what apps kind of adopt that. But I think what Apple's really pushing into is it's moving more into that car experience. It's working with BMW and Ford, kind of pushing the way in there. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see what happens over the next year or two.
So what apps do you think Apple looking to integrate? I'm assuming it's like apps that help with EV charging, for example. Other types, like what's a good example? What apps would you love to see?
Yep. So I think for the EV charging apps, most of them, well, I would expect to see probably most of the big charging networks try and integrate into CarPlay. They're probably going to have that race to get there by September. For parking, I would expect apps like Gas Buddy and Parking Hero to try and move in to the car experience, because I'm pretty sure they've always had the interest. It's just because there wasn't that template that worked for their specific use case, Apple wouldn't give them the entitlement, and so they've been kind of locked out in the past. Now that there's these new categories, I would expect those sorts of apps to come into CarPlay now.
Okay.
And I think one of the other categories, I think there was dining or takeout or delivery, something like that. I'd have to go back and double check, but there were 3 categories I think they added and they mentioned in the keynote, and there was parking, EV charging, and I think it was dining or takeout.
Yeah, all really cool stuff. All right, we are kind of running out of time. Honestly, we could be here all day and talking about it, because this is some really cool stuff. But thank you everyone for joining the panel. It was awesome. And with that in mind, this is the end of today's webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us, as for all the attendees. In the meantime, I posted a few things in the chat. The registration form for our 5th bug, the feedback form that we have. So if you have any questions, comments, please let us know. And the speaker form for the upcoming bug if you want to hold a presentation or join a panel talk. As always, if you have any questions, you can just shoot me a DM on Twitter. All right. And hope you all had a great time. Thanks again for joining, and see you next time. Right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.